Hey everybody, this is Deji.
And Chris?
Welcome to the Lot One podcast. Today we're talking to Emmy Award winning documentary producer Jessica Kelley about how to take on unscripted freelance and what it means to be a documentarian, and much more. So let's get into the show. Today we have Jessica Kelley on the podcast. Thank you so much for being on here.
Hi, thanks for having me. So excited.
For those people who haven't read the sides, do you mind giving us your backstory?
Yeah, of course. I am from Ohio originally, so I have that
Nice.
Midwest charm. Moved to New York in 2009. And that's where my career really started to blossom. I had started in TV broadcasting. When I moved to New York, I actually started working for a newspaper. Their format there was documentaries. And that was kind of the start of where I am now. And that was in 2009. And so since then, I've been doing documentary films. I worked there for about a decade, and COVID happened. I was home and had a lot of time on my hands to think and made a decision to try the freelance life because I wanted to be challenged and I wanted to add new content to my portfolio that I wouldn't be able to do in the corporate world. So I left at the beginning of 2021, and I've been a freelancer ever since then, an
Well,
independent filmmaker, adding some narrative work to my portfolio, some commercials, some marketing. But my love and my main focus is in the documentary world. So that's predominantly what I work on is true crime and character stories in the non-scripted world.
nice. That's awesome. Sort of, when did you know that you wanted to become a filmmaker?
Like I said, I started out in broadcast TV.
Hmm.
I did the journalism thing because I wanted to make an impact with my work. When I got the chance to do a documentary, it was much different skill set and workflow because it's more long form and you
Hmm.
spend a lot more time with these people, days, sometimes weeks, depending
Yeah.
on the story. And then when you make that finished product, the viewer themselves has to, when they click play, make the decision of this is more of a commitment I'm going to make instead of just a 2 to 3 minute package I see on my nightly news. So
Hmm.
there's a give and take there between both the filmmaker and the viewer of, hey, this is going to take a little bit more of your time, but I promise it's worth it.
Yeah.
And I liked having that more intimate relationship, if you will, with the viewers. And after doing some topics of hard stories from communities
Hmm.
of people that didn't really have a platform or a voice, and seeing the change that a documentary made versus maybe something you would see on your nightly news of a 2 minute coverage, I realized though this is more investment in time from both parties, I'm seeing more impact with my work. And so I want to start putting more focus and energy there. And so that's how I decided, all right, maybe films and long form is
Yeah.
more my style.
That's interesting. I'm curious, like, how did you start in broadcast? You had a show that you created for like your local.
Yeah.
How did that start?
In every area of my career, I have flourished when I've had support from the exec team
Mm.
and the freedom to explore and just try anything that comes to mind. In every show that I've developed, that's what I've been given is such a unique opportunity. And in that instance, like you were saying, it was 2007 and I was just fresh out of college and thought I knew exactly how to do my job and do everything. Uh, and I'm like, I have a degree, so therefore I'm obviously a professional that knows what I'm doing. And I was just given freedom by this exec team of the local channel and said, this was going into 2010. And the key word always was millennial viewers. Oh, we want to get millennial viewers.
Hmm.
So their
Interesting.
thinking is, let's get a millennial to develop something because they should know what millennial viewers want. Um, and so, yeah, I I took just what I knew from watching like MTV and VH1 and tried, uh,
Yeah.
entertainment aspects of those shows and reality TV, and marry it with information that I felt was important, and kind of make that, daily show last week tonight feel where it's like, hey, I'm
Hmm.
entertaining you, but I'm also tricking you into learning things about,
Yeah.
our culture and about what's happening in the world, and spurring discussions between people our age about what's important to us. And so, yeah, that it was called Offbeat, and that show uh, taught me a lot about sometimes just because you have a degree and you went to school does not mean you know what you're doing until you are actually in the thick of things and you just try
Hmm.
and you have to fail.
Yeah.
And that has been now my goal in my career, even, 20 years later, of I always want to fail forward. I want to get to that point where I always want to be uncomfortable and never be a big fish in a little pond. I want to be thrown into a situation where I'm like, just fake it till you make it. And God, I hope this is the right way to do things,
Yeah.
because a lot of magic is made that way. And you learn a lot quicker by being thrown in the fire and learning, oh, okay, that's not how you do that. Let me try it this way.
The best teacher is your failures, right? Or your mistakes, or
Yeah, and that's always been the popular question in this industry of like, should I go to film school? That's something I get asked by so many young people a lot. And, obviously one person can't give you the answer of what you should do, but
Hmm.
I'm very much a team like you just need experience. Film school gives you that experience in a safe environment. Like if you have great teachers and a great support system and
Hmm.
they're able to give you tools that you wouldn't necessarily have access to because that costs money,
Yeah.
then that's a great avenue for you to go and just fail and try things, and have time to sit down and study all the greats and what led us here and the evolution of filmmaking or television, and learn, why do we do it this way? And then, okay, now that you know the foundations, now go out and try and replicate that,
Hmm.
and find out what you like and what your voice is as a producer or a director or whatever position that you're eager to fill. Or maybe think you're going there and thinking, oh, I definitely want to be a director. And then doing a couple of projects and learning, okay, that was too much. I actually like more the producer side of things.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity that allows you to experiment and learn more about yourself and your craft before you go out into the real world and people yell at you because you're costing them money because you don't know what you
yeah.
Yeah.
so
There's a I saw that you have done 50 shorts when you were, or maybe over 50 shorts when you were in New York.
yeah.
What do you feel like your biggest lessons were from those 50 shorts, or 50 plus shorts probably?
I think my biggest lesson out of all of that was how to deal with people and different
Mm,
personalities. um, I am a big believer in, people can learn technical, camera, aperture. You can learn how to run the equipment, but to be able to manage a crew of very different creative personalities,
yeah.
and to be able to speak to talent who, depending on the topic that you're dealing with, you could be dealing with, an athlete who is just so sick of doing interviews all day, or a woman who has to retell a horrific story of child abuse, and you have to sit there and ask her to be vulnerable with like 10 people standing around her holding a boom
Yeah.
and lights, in this light,
Yeah.
and being sensitive and empathetic in any of those situations, while also keeping in the back of your mind, oh, lunch is in 10 minutes. And I know Larry over there with the lighting, he gets real hangry because his sugar gets low, and just being able to
Yeah.
manage every aspect of that and herd everyone towards the same goal, and make sure that the morale is still, we're excited to do this and we know the end result is going to be something that we're all going to be proud of and excited about, and that it will cause some kind of impact on someone's life, whether it makes a viewer out there feel heard and seen, or it changes laws in the state of New York, whatever it be. And that's hard sometimes. Sometimes that's harder
Yeah.
than just telling the story itself. And that's something that you can't learn in a classroom. Like, you only learn by being in that situation and then reflecting and being mindful after the final product has been published and everything's done and everybody's moved on to the next project, and you're thinking about, all right, what can I take from that to take into the next project? What did I learn? And you can't learn those things from reading it in a book. You can only learn it from doing.
The Lot 1 podcast is brought to you by the Tourist Hat Coffee Company. You know what keeps me running on those long film sets, Stagey?
What's that, Chris?
Coffee. And you know what's the worst thing ever?
A swift kick in the pants.
No, bad coffee. So that's why I choose Tourist Hat Coffee Company's high quality coffee beans. Their artisan roasted single origin coffee and handcrafted blends are so much better than those stale stuff you get from those other brands.
Yeah, those things are bad.
Tourist Hat Coffee Company's coffee is artisan roasted, micro roasted, single origin, and their small batch roaster that handcrafts their blends to maximize peak freshness upon delivery. Family owned and operated. What more could you ask for from a coffee company, Deji?
I literally can't think of anything else.
If you're still not sold, a portion of each purchase goes towards contributing to some of their favorite nonprofit organizations, such as Animation Dance Community, Seeds of Hope International, and Beautiful Gate Orphanage.
These guys are good.
Make Tourist Hat Coffee Company your new go-to quality coffee choice with our exclusive offer for you, the Lot 1 podcast listener.
Oh, listen up, guys.
First-time customers can use the code LOT1BOGO at checkout to receive one free bag of coffee when you buy two. That's right, Deji, a buy two, get one free.
Whoa.
So head on over to touristhatcoffeecompany.com and use promo code LOT1BOGO at checkout. Again, that is LOT1 BOGO at checkout. Whether you work in the film industry or not and want a delicious cup of coffee, this is the perfect time to stock up on your favorite blends of coffee or try something new. I know I'll be brewing Tourist Hat on my sets moving forward, Deji. Again, that's promo code LOT1 BOGO, LOT1 BOGO at checkout to claim your buy two, get one free. Terms and conditions apply. Tourist Hat, coffee that fuels your adventure.
Do you feel like you would recommend people do as many shorts as possible? Like, do you think that that's a pretty good path to getting that knowledge, or would you have done it differently?
No, I think the most experience you can get, the better, because every time you do it, you're going to learn something new and you're going to adjust how you do things so that you do it either more efficiently, or you communicate better, or you realize, oh, okay, so in pre-production I should really start thinking about that now and not wait until we're in post and then be like, oh no, now we don't have that. So
Yeah.
the more, and that doesn't have to do with shorts, that could be anything, whatever it is, that could be trying to do a TikTok every day, like whatever it is your specialty is, the more experience you get, the better it is. And I would say alongside that, a parallel is always ingesting as well, because that is part of the process as well. I think we've all been at that point where we're just outputting so much because the demand is there, but we don't take time to ingest art or ingest something that inspires us, and to take notes and to be fed with content that we can learn from. And sometimes you don't even realize it. Sometimes you just, oh, I'm tired, and you turn on the TV, you start watching something, and you're like, oh, I've never seen that shot before. That's really cool, and you're watching like
Yeah.
Love is Blind, or that's not saying that's like your go-to for inspiration, but you need that downtime in order to feed your creative soul so that you can be better next time you're on set or in a meeting.
So do you find a lot of your inspiration from narrative work, or do you find it like, what is your inspiration? What is it for you? Like, what do you turn to? Is it terrible reality TV show like Love is Blind, or are we talking about majestic epics like Dune, you know?
I do watch a lot of documentaries. It depends on my mind space where I'm at,
Mm,
but I do try and keep up with whatever the latest documentaries are, like what people are talking about, because just in the past few years, the format has changed a
yeah.
lot. I mean, we're coming from documentaries where a lot of times these were like old school journalists, like the people I used to work with at the newspaper, where they're like, you have to, this is journalism 101. And now I'm seeing docs on Netflix of like, it's 90% recreation, and
Mm,
the stylized shots are, you got a whole crew and in a studio, and it's beautiful. But then it's that question of like, where's the ethics? Because at what point are you just retelling a story with a lot of b-roll instead of like the more guerrilla filmmaking of run and gun? Is there a hierarchy of like what's better, or is it just someone's preference and how they tell a story? So it's always important to have your ear to the ground and be able to be a part of those conversations, especially if you're freelance and people hire you for a certain look or feel or whatever your voice is that you're known for. You have to be able to have these conversations with clients and say like, I'm aware of what's going on. What is your preference? How do you want to execute this? Because it's your job to know the correct questions to ask,
mm,
because a lot of times people come to you, and I've had this, we've all had this, where people hire you and say, well, I want you to make a viral video, and you're like, that what does that mean?
Yeah.
But you have to be the one to guide the conversation and to ask the question. I liken it to like, I'm the doctor and they're the patient with the sickness, and they're just like, here's the symptoms that I have and I want to fix it, and you have to know the questions to ask to get
mm,
them to articulate what it is they want,
yeah.
because sometimes they don't know that technical jargon, or they don't know how to articulate it. So you have to be the one to guide them and get them to a place where they feel confident enough to tell you, this is what I'm looking for, and then you go do it.
Do you feel like freelance has been freeing in that way for you? Having more freedom to create the stories versus like if you were in a more corporate sense of like you're telling their narrative versus you're uncovering.
I mean, that's 90% of the reason why I wanted to leave the corporate world, because I was feeling very yeah, restricted in what I wanted to do, especially in non-scripted world and working with journalists. Like, there is a lot of lines that you cannot cross. Just a great example is the food show I worked on. I wanted to do like more product placements, because I'm like, that's a great way to make money,
Mm,
easy to do. I got a couple of people I already know that can do it. And they're like, absolutely not. That is not ethical. That's not journalism. And I was like, okay, I get it. And I respect that. But I wanted to be able to play with things like that. And even like, I'm like, what kind of contract do you even write up for that? Like, what do you do? Just the things that like, I don't have no business being involved in that at all. But it just intrigued me, because I'm like, what does that look like? What does that process do? And so I wanted to be able to be in those kinds of conversations of things I'd never done before. And I'm like, well, let's just try it. And sometimes you get to a point where, um, I felt like I was in a good place. I'm like, we've gotten the show to a point where it's comfortable, and we know, everybody knows this is the template, and we go bam, 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 done, move on. And
Mm.
that is a great place to be because you feel like, all right, we have a solid foundation. I can hand over my baby to you, and I know they're going to be taken care of.
Mm.
And I love that for them, but I need to go try something else now. And
Yeah.
so that's what I did. And I was so confident and so ready. And oh my God, was it terrifying? It was, there were days where I'm like, what am I doing? That was wow. And I had dreams of like consistent paychecks. And I'm like, why would I walk away from that in healthcare? But in the end, I have grown leaps and bounds, putting
Mm.
myself in situations where I would never be able to learn from somebody on a set that because we would never have crossed paths if I
Yeah.
hadn't have went on a different path. So
Hmm.
worth it, terrifying but worth it.
I kind of go back a little bit after doing the broadcast. You went to Beijing.
Yeah, I did the show, and then I went for my master's, and
Yeah.
it was for international media. And so part of that program, you had to go to Beijing. First, we went to Hong Kong, and then Beijing, and then finished the rest of the program in the United States, studying other cultures. But yeah, and then I had to take like a year of Mandarin before I went there, so that just have like a foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And I mean, unfortunately, I don't remember. It's like also the piano, I took so many years of that. And if you don't use it every day, you don't, it's like a muscle. And again, but that was more broadcast focus. So it was more like live. And at that point, I also thought like maybe I want to be a technical director, like, pushing buttons. Like at that point, I still wasn't sure exactly what route I was going to take. Um, and when I finished that program, uh, I was fresh out of college. That was like 2008. That was during the recession, uh, and very hard to find jobs. So I did a lot of freelancing again. Um, and then the opportunity in New York opened up. It was just by total fate. And
Mm.
I actually didn't even want to take the job because it was a newspaper, and having been in these advanced programs where they're like, this was the time where they're like, internet is the future, and one day you'll watch all your television on internet, and we're like, what? That's crazy. So for me to go to a newspaper straight out of having that in my head every day, I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it for a year, and then I'll leave and just be glad that I had this stepping stone of something, where it's still journalism and I'm still going to learn from some people who have been in this field for a long time, but then I'm going to skedaddle. But I ended up being there for 12 years because they, in that era, it was also a very popular time in media where newspapers were either owned or worked alongside broadcast television. So I got the broadcast TV experience, I got the newspaper experience, and the documentary experience. So it was like a beautiful um, marriage of all these different ways, and also internet, because we would produce a package for TV, for the website, um, and then if it's depending on the topic, follow it along and make a long form investigative documentary about it. So
Mm.
it was a blessing and a disguise that I was able to learn storytelling for so many different platforms
Yeah.
and be able to take that. And it's helped me so much in my freelance world. So
Greetings, film enthusiasts. It's Christopher from the Lot One Podcast. Ready for an exclusive pass to our cinematic world? Join our Patreon page for early access, behind the scenes content, and a community of fellow film pros and enthusiasts. Your support keeps the reels turning. Head to patreon.com/the Lot One Podcast and let's make movie magic together. Thanks for being a part of the Lot One Podcast family.
You've had experienced a lot of different things in order to sort of find the thing that you align with the most, you doing broadcast TV and journalism, and then now it's sort of like all those things sort of like, puzzle pieced you into documentaries in a way, how would you advise, I guess, someone else to do something similar?
I would say just put yourself where you know the action is. I mean,
Hmm.
I did the same even when I left. I wanted to, uh, I had a goal for myself to add at least one scripted production to my portfolio a year, because I'd never done anything like that before. I wanted to try it. And I also wanted to see how different the workflow was compared to non scripted, and if there was anything from that world that I could take and use in my documentaries when I make them. So it I did the same thing that I would tell others to do, and whatever their interest is just look. We live in an age now where there's some kind of Reddit or Facebook group or Instagram page for whatever interest you have.
Hmm.
So go search for those people and talk to them and ask them for advice, and find your local groups that are doing it. And if no one's doing it, then you start doing it, and you just start practicing, and you upload it, and you see the reaction it gets, and you ask for feedback. If you truly enjoy it and are interested in it, you're going to just naturally be ingrained in it. You're going to naturally want to, as soon as you turn on TV, computer, whatever, you're going to go to that and watch it and learn everything you can and soak up everything you can, and then just use what you have seen and learned and try to apply it. Anytime I'm on a set, I try and find people who have more experience than me, or just different experiences, and I just kind of observe them, and then I'll ask them questions. I just always use every opportunity that you're in, treat it as a learning opportunity, like you're an intern. It doesn't matter how many years experience you have, you can always learn something, whether it's,
Yeah.
oh, I never want to do that because I see how that affects everyone or the
Yeah.
workflow, or hey, I really like how you phrased that. That's really good. Like, I'm going to keep that in mind next time. I just
Mm.
said that the other day to a producer I was working with. She did such a great job of just keeping the morale and the temperature of the set so positive and so open. So everyone, it didn't matter if you're the director or a PA, everyone felt comfortable sharing ideas or pitching
Mm.
in. And it is so rare to see that. And I literally went up to her and was like, I'm taking mental notes. You're doing such a, and like, giving her feedback, asking her questions of, what have you done? This is so interesting. Like, just always learning from people. Put yourself in
Yeah.
a position where you're always the student, and you can see people that you admire, see them at work, and just observe. Be like the Jane Goodall of whatever your interest is.
I do that a lot as well, no matter what position I'm in. If I'm a PA, I always put myself closer to the leadership because I want to learn how they're doing it and the things I like and the things I don't like. Can't tell you how many times I've come back from a set and be like, I will never run one of my sets that way.
Hmm.
But then there's been a lot of times too where I've been like, oh, I didn't know that, or that's really smart. I'm going to apply that to every single one of my sets. So, and I always ask questions too, even if it makes them feel uncomfortable. I always start it with, hey, like, if you can't answer this, that's fine, but I'm going to ask it, you know, how much money did you make? Whatever it is, something silly but like, it's always for me, it's always like the client side of it. Like where did you get this connection? How did you foster it? How did the conversation go? Stuff like that. Cause I want to apply that to everything that I do. And that's so important. I feel like a lot of people, especially when they're starting, just kind of stand there on set because they're like, oh, this is my job. This is my lane. I'm going to stay here, which is also important on some levels and depending on what set you're on. But I always look out for the people on my sets who are going above and beyond and kind of taking that extra step of interest, I guess you can say. Um, so I'm just saying, like, that's what you do is, I was like, wow, I'm glad I do that then. If a pro at that level is saying that's what she does, then I'm happy that I do it as well. So.
You got to use the sandwich method, you know. You got to start with the bun, which is the compliment, and then the meat, which is what you want to get out of it, and then the other bun, which is another compliment. So
Mm.
you start with something nice. By the way, here's what I need, and then you end with something
Yeah,
nice, and then you scram.
there it
Yeah.
is.
How do you begin working on a doc? So like what are the first steps in like pre-production? How do you find the story?
A lot of times, it's either something that you see in the news. Um, or some kind of issue within society that you're like
Mm.
this, or some kind of community that you feel is not getting enough of a platform to speak, something that upsets you, that you're like, people need to see this, and there needs to be a discussion around this.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be the one to start that conversation. And then you just start looking for the people in that world, and you start talking to people, and then once you're done talking to one person, you ask them, who else should I talk to, who else is important that could tell me more information about this. And you just start working your way out, and you become ingrained in that world, whatever it is that you're telling. I think it's very important that everyone know who you are, what you're trying to do, and that they know, like, oh, okay, this is the person that is like, that knows us inside and out, and that can tell our story to everyone else.
Mm.
It builds a lot of trust within the community. If they're like, oh, so and so sent you, okay, I feel more comfortable, I can
Mm.
talk to you. It also shows that you're serious about doing your research, and you're serious about knowing the story and who's involved. And people are like, okay, you're putting the work and the effort to actually get to know this and to know our story, so let me
Yeah.
help you. Or sometimes, like in a recent case, I was interviewing somebody for a doc, and it was a very vulnerable interview that she did. um, and if you've ever done that before, it's this phenomenon of like, when someone opens up to you and tells you this tearful, horrible story, they have what I call like a vulnerable hangover. So after the interview's done, and the cameras are put away, and they're kind of coming down from that high, they just feel like, oh, now I can tell you any and everything about my life. And they
Interesting.
tell you like it's the most intimate details that you're like, oh my goodness. uh, but a lot of times, in this most recent case, it led to a whole other documentary that I started filming, because she mentioned something, and I was like, wait, what? That's actually very interesting. Can we talk more about that? And then it led to me doing a completely different documentary on a different topic. So you can come to a story a bunch of different ways. But then once you get the story, like I said, you just start ingraining yourself in that community, in that world, and you become an expert, and you become the safe space for people to come to,
Mm.
so that they can open up to you. Because eventually, when you are in production, you want to be that familiar face that everybody already knows, and already knows, like, oh, okay, I know what they're doing,
Yeah.
so that they can feel comfortable with you when the cameras and lights are all pointed at them. Because so many people, I think that's the one of the most difficult parts about working with real people and non-scripted, is that they're
Right.
not used to that, and that is very jarring, and it's very uncomfortable. And just think about all the people in your life that that are uncomfortable with just taking a photo or being in front of a camera, and they're shy, and
Mm.
they're like, oh, no, no thanks, no. you know Now imagine having like 10 people be like, I want to take a video of you. Can you tell me about the intimate
Yeah.
moments of your life? And you're like, oh my God. So you have to already have that foundation laid, so that they feel comfortable to be able to give you those sound bites
Yeah.
that you need, and to be able to be coached by you. Because that's another thing, as an interviewer, your job is to coach somebody so that they feel comfortable saying what they need to say, but saying in a way that you need the full sentence in the context, that
Mm.
like, all right, we can cut around that, but we can use that sound bite, and it'll give the context, and that'll help lead into the next. It's a unique challenge
Yeah.
working with real people who are not screen tested.
Yeah.
But it sounds super like intimate, like you get to know people. Like I mean, we talk about this sometimes, but like this podcast is kind of like our way to like get to know the people that always seem to be behind that, like mysterious filmmaker, like cliff you have to get over, or like mountain you have to get over just to get to talk to people who are working in the depths. So like for me, like
Mm.
that is like in the similar way. It's like I'm sure it's like self-rewarding to hear these stories
Yeah, in fact, I think I want to change my answer now because you asked me, like, what did I know I wanted to be in documentaries? And I think that that's it. It's because that's my favorite part of doing documentaries is the interview portion of
Mm,
it, especially when, I've done a lot of true crime, and these are very difficult moments that people have to tell you about. And it's such an honor to me to be able to give them that safe space. And
Mhm.
even in a technical way of I've spoken to other documentary filmmakers who have given me great advice of like how to camouflage the video village so that someone who is about to step into a studio or a very formal sit down interview, they don't walk in seeing a bunch of cameras or
mm,
a bunch of people sitting there looking at monitors. So it just
mm,
feels like a safe space for them to open up and give me this gift that they've probably sometimes never even told their children or their
yeah.
spouse, but they're telling now that we are documenting forever. It will always be now on a screen
Yeah.
somewhere, um, that we can share with the world. And that is wow. Like, these are things that sometimes they don't even tell their therapist, or, and I get to be
Wow.
that person that is like, holds their hand through that and is like, we're going to get through this together. And I'm going to help you look the best way that you can and speak it in an articulate way and tell your story and use that story to make a difference in so many other people's lives. And that's a beautiful thing.
But what about you? Like, does you like person interviewing, like the amount of like messed up, terrible, crazy, like emotional things that you've had to intake? Like, how do you mentally like keep it under control hearing some of these terrifying stories? Do you feel like there has to be like you need like a level of like X thing to handle that, or is that just something you learn over time, or you think your broadcast has been a part of that?
That's actually one of my favorite topics in this industry that I try and talk to people about a lot, especially reporters. I feel like when we think of people who deal with trauma on a daily basis, we think of, EMT,
Yeah.
firefighters, police officers. We never think about newspaper reporters or television
Mm.
reporters. Like, these people see the worst of the worst every single day. They're right there on the crime scenes with the police and EMT and fire, but nobody talks about, hey, maybe we should have some counseling in a newsroom
Mm.
so that when they come back after the third dead body that they've seen this week, maybe they can talk to somebody about that and not cry while driving home to their family tonight.
Mm.
Um, and I think that conversation is happening a little bit more, but it's not, unfortunately, it's not a priority in these corporate newsrooms. In documentary, I think it just depends on the production company that you're with and the people that you surround yourself with. But yeah, it is a real problem that a lot of journalists deal with. It's actually like it's an ongoing joke in the journalist world of like, once you have kids, you then become a public relations officer because you become so sensitive. You have children, you're like, I can't go into work every day and report on deaths and
Mm.
abuse and then go home to my child. I need just a regular 9 to 5 where I just send out press releases so I don't cry. um, that's how we deal with it. You get dark humor, or you become a PR person. There, there is no, hey, maybe you should go talk to Susan in counseling and come
Yeah.
back. one of the very first like long form documentaries I worked on was the 10th anniversary of 9/11, where we
Oh.
interviewed, we reached out to every single family who had lost somebody in 9/11 and interviewed them about how their life has changed in the 10 years. And there were many days where I was like, I have to take a break. I can't, like,
Mm.
being surrounded by grief 24/7 and having to, you know, hear it. Because then you're in the editing room and you hear, and,
Yeah.
if you edited, you have to like go back, listen to that clip again, go back, listen to it again. And it just gets to you. And there were many times where I'd be driving home and just crying because like I can
Mm.
only hear about dead babies so many times a day before it gets to you.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important topic in documentary and journalism to talk about the mental health of the people telling these stories.
Hey, aspiring filmmakers, get early access to interviews, listen to behind the scenes tea, and explore the after show magic only on our Patreon at patreon.com/the Lot One podcast. Let's get to sipping. How often are you able to, have initial idea be the same idea that makes it to the very end?
Yeah, that happens a lot. We talk about the difficulties of interviewing real people on
Yeah.
camera. But the other big caveat you have with documentary filmmaking is sometimes you start out with what you think the story is. And then as you follow these people and you get more invested in their life, and even if you've done interviews with them and they're like, oh, this is it. But then you realize, like, well, you left this small context out. That's interesting. That's definitely part of the story we need to include.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have to go back, and sometimes you're like, okay, that totally changes what I thought the third act would be, so
Mm.
follow this through. Or sometimes, like I said, the long form documentary I'm working on now, there's been many times where they've went down a rabbit hole and you're like, oh, this could be what leads to the ending, and you follow it, and then like 2 weeks later you're like, okay, that didn't lead anywhere, but I thought it could be something, so
Yeah.
it is very you have to be able to pivot at any moment and have a general overarching theme. That's never going to change. You're
Right.
always going to have some thesis statement that you're like, that's what this is about. But the subplots or the way that you get to the very ending thesis statement could be totally different from what you first set out to be. Like, oh, this character, he's going to be a great supporting character that we bring in and weave through to support, our main character. But then once you start spending time with him, you're like, oh my gosh, he didn't even mention that he's a part of this group that's like making all this change. All right, let's add a little bit more time with him, so you just
Mm.
always have to be flexible and work with a team that knows that, hey, this is, always have your eyes out, because what you think going into the story, that may not be the
Yeah.
final polished product.
It seems like a lot to kind of keep in your head, while you're doing interviews. I guess, what is sort of your method to sort of keep it all?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing of like when you're prepping for an interview, obviously you're going to have talking points that you want them to hit on. I have a format where I'll ask the question 3 times, 3 different ways. I always tell them, like, okay, we're going to do this in layers. So the first layer, when I ask you the question, I just need a one sentence answer. And it's more of like I'm getting the timeline from them. So I'll be like, tell me the first time you met so and so in
Mm.
one sentence. And I get that down. And that's also just a great way of like, they don't have to think. They're just kind of regurgitating facts that are easy. And this is especially great if someone is nervous to be on camera,
Mm.
and or nervous about, the story that they are about to tell.
Yeah.
You get all that down, then they kind of feel confident because they're like, okay, I answered like 10 questions. Those are all easy. And
Hmm.
then the second layer is you start to add, you ask the same question, but then you add a little bit of context. Okay, so what was happening when you met so and so? You said you met them in August of 1997. So what was happening when you met them? Like you said, you were at a Mets ball game. Did you bump into? And you start adding so that then they give you a little bit more context, and then they kind of
Mm.
tell the story with that second layer. And then the final layer is when you really start adding the tension and the drama to the story. All right, so you were saying when you met so and so in August at that Mets game, that's kind of when the story really took off and your relationship spurred. What were you feeling when you? And then that's when you get them to talk about the emotions of it, and then that is also, you know, your last stage where it's like, I need you to be vulnerable now. Tell me what you're thinking, what you're feeling. We got the facts. We got the world. You painted the world of what was happening around you. Now I want to see what was happening inside of you. You know, when you read a book, it never translates the same when you watch the movie, because in a book, you get to hear their inner dialogue. So that third layer of the interview is like, what was your inner dialogue? How, and that's the part where the viewer is going to connect with him the most, and where the story is really going to find its richness is when they start sharing, like, oh my gosh, I was so nervous to meet him because he, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's how you build the story through an interview. And then also that's usually when you find out a lot of things that you didn't know, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, well, now with that, let me write stuff, you know. When you are doing those 3 layers of interview questions, a lot of times they add a lot more. And then you have to be able to have time to be like, oh, okay, that's an interesting moment that you didn't mention before. And you taking notes, like, follow up with that in the third time that I ask them. That's why you always want to ask them like a couple of different times, because sometimes they'll add a little bit more information and you can make a note. All right, the next time I ask them this question, I need to explore that a little bit more, what they just mentioned. It also helps them feel like they get 3 chances to tell the story too, you know, like, because a lot of times, even though you tell them like, hey, this is going to be edited, it's fine, like, we're going to make sure that you look good, because it does not do us any favor if you're umming and ahhing and you don't tell the story well. But even then, if they're like, oh, I know it's edited, but still, if you give them 3 chances to tell it, they feel much more confident. So
before we get to the end, Chris has a very important, extremely
all the time.
pertinent question.
So important, Deji. So important.
It is. I mean, I'll hold my breath for it because I know it's gonna be very.
If you had one piece of advice to give someone who wants to get into documentary filmmaking, short, sweet, 1 sentence, what would that one piece of advice be?
Okay.
Oh, I can breathe now. Okay.
Yes.
If you want to get into documentary filmmaking, get out there and do it. Simple and sweet.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. Just, there is absolutely no excuse. We live in a time where you have access to a phone that can film. Almost everyone does. You have access. There's teenagers that probably edit video 10 times better than I do, because that's all they've known in their entire life. You have access to all the content in the world that you could find. There's absolutely no excuse, if you are truly interested in doing this, to search out for information and learn from people and watch as much as you can to learn from that, and then to go out and just do it and practice. And the more you do, the more you're going to learn, and the better you're going to get each and every time you finish a project. So I would add that too. But make sure you finish.
Yeah.
So many times where you're like, I have so many good ideas, and you start a project and then you get discouraged or whatever, and you never finish it. Do and make sure you finish it and go on to the next one.
Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure to hear your perspective on documentary filmmaking. It's been really cool, actually.
Yeah. And Jessica, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you or see your work?
Yes.
I'm on Instagram, just the director. I also, you can go to my webpage, which I need to update. Oh, this is a good reminder. It's Jessie, JESSYKAYE.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those people who are ready to hear the after show, come on over to Patreon and we'll party it up over there.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
And that's a wrap for today's Lot 1 podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a review and share it with your mother's friend, Alice, because it really helps others find us. Big shout out to our producer, Mina Vazarian, and our editor, Carlos Luna. They are the backbone, so they need a shout out. If you're not a part of our exclusive Patreon community yet, head on over to patreon.com/the Lot 1 podcast. That is the Lot number 1 podcast for early access, bonus content like the after show, and much more. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to our incredible Patreon supporters. Your backing keeps the Lot 1 podcast lights on. Connect with us on Instagram and TikTok at the Lot 1 podcast. That is the Lot number 1 podcast for behind the scenes content and updates. We're now accepting listener mail. So if you got any questions for us or our guests, drop us a line. Also, if you're interested in finding out more about Lot 1 Productions and all we got going on over there, check us out at lot1productions.com. Huge thanks to our sponsor, Tourist Hat Coffee Company. Remember to use the discount code LOT1BOGO for your exclusive buy 2 get 1 free deal. Again, discount code is LOT1BOGO. That is LOT, the number 1, BOGO at checkout for your exclusive deal. Get some coffee from them because it is fire. Until next time, keep those creative fires burning, dream big, and remember, the filmmaking journey is a ride worth taking. See you next week.